society, by religion, by culture, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, and adding on to that, I was just thinking then, you know, my own cousin wears a hijab and is just got accepted into Harvard and is studying medicine and has, you know, been a karate champion. And then my other cousin is very, you know, same age, is married with her, you know, in her mid-20s, and her fourth child is coming. And it just shows the diversity of expression, and I think that that's really positive. And I think that as Islamic women now, they have so much more access to exposed Muslim women who are doing different things, and they can have various mentors in so many different areas. I use my boxing as a vehicle for positive change. I always try and advocate that other women can do exactly what I'm doing. They can be a multiple boxing champion if they want to. They can turn professional. Gemma Van Loan, who is the director of a documentary called BamBam, actually, that will be playing in Yarraville this Monday. If anyone's interested, they can get a ticket on FanForce. But the documentary shows that as a Muslim woman, you know, my different challenges in my life, and that I've been able to overcome and pursue what my goals and dreams are. And I just think it's really important that young Muslim women have exposure to diversity of other Muslim women doing different things outside of the box. I'm optimistic.
Do you want to have a go at inspiring young feminists?
Yeah, like Tasneem, I know young Muslim women who are from both sides, but who have a very thought through and informed, and they're second generation, often tertiary educated to like postgrad level, on why they are or are not comfortable in identifying as feminist. You know, in fact, the ones who don't identify as feminists are often better read, and have considered it in greater depth than the ones who are. So, and again, I'm not going to argue with them on that, because they're not taking it from there by upholding patriarchy. They're not then saying, and that's why, you know, everyone has to do what the mullah down the road tells us to do. That's, they do believe in equality, they do believe in women's rights, they are actively fighting against violence against women, so that's good enough for me. I will say that for a lot of young women too, the fight against racism is more immediate and more compelling than the fight against sexism or patriarchy or gender discrimination. Or they go hand in hand. It's not like you have to choose one over the other. But when there are higher levels of unemployment among, well, Muslims in general and Muslim women in particular, when they have ticked off all the boxes of, you know, doing their homework, doing well in school, doing well at university, and you say, well, what more does it take? Come on, you know. And they may have had to, you know, put their case to their parents as to why they should be focusing on career rather than marriage, and why they actually didn't need to have an arranged marriage, and why they were choosing that life, but it wasn't, you know, that, but having chosen this free, or in inverted commas, having chosen this independent and different pattern to what their mothers and aunts had, and not being treated equally when they got there, it can be very disillusioning. And in lots of ways, I think that if we want young women to identify as feminists, or to continue as identify as feminists, then we really have to show that we're standing with them when this bullshit goes down.
There are,
to use an academic term.
There are some really good questions here, and it's a shame we won't be able to get to all of them. So if you can help me by voting the ones that you actually want me to ask. And one of them here is one of the ones that has been voted the most. What is your message to women who feel it is their religious duty to be submissive to their husbands?
No, it's not. Yeah, no. Oh gosh, it's not their religious duty to be submissive. It's It's religiously, incumbent to be critical in your thinking, and to think why would anyone make what's behind a question like that in the first place, and who's actually making that call? It's certainly not Islam.
I would also be, okay, are you going to be submissive on your offspring's behalf as well? If you can see that your husband's line is going against the interests of your children, are you prepared to make not just this sacrifice for yourself, but this sacrifice for your sons and probably more likely your daughters as well?
Yeah. Again, my understanding of the way Islam looks at marriage is that it's an equal partnership. So I think there's a saying, an ayah that says you're garments for each other. So it's not a question of one over another. It's you in it together. So subservience and obedience to your husband is a gross distortion of that.
I've got to say, some of the women who hold that line are not exactly submissive types. But anyway, they want other women to be submissive to the other women's husbands. I don't have the impression that that's the way that they run their own lives.
Okay, another one. As Muslims, we are so often sick of being left out of the conversation, yet we do the same to our own. What steps can we take to be more inclusive of Black Muslim women in Melbourne?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we talk about intersectional feminism discrimination. It includes the voices of all communities, and the Muslim community in particular is, I think, guilty on many levels of not including that voice front and centre in event planning, in management, in discussion, in conversation. I've been to more events than I can count where I find the representation of East and Southern and West African Muslims is absent, and I think that's
and
very
Aboriginal
problematic.
Muslims, I have to say, I think it's quite opportunistic. We love to cite Anthony Mundine. We love to cite Aboriginal Muslims as evidence of our Australianness. What, you're going to tell, it's Anthony Mundine, isn't it? Yeah. You're going to tell Anthony Mundine to go back to where he came from? Yeah, right. And I know Muslim Aboriginal women have the same deal, that yeah, everybody wants them when we're wanting to prove that we're really Australian and that Islam is an Australian faith, but we don't really talk to them or give them that equal treatment. And I feel often ashamed when I see the way that Aboriginal Muslims, men and women, are spoken to by other members of the community, and very patronising, like, oh, welcome, sister, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of colonial baggage that comes with Muslims from countries where they were colonised. They bring some of that mentality back, which manifests in the way that they have an almost classist view of their own communities and those outside of them. And I call that out when I see it. It's not popular, but it needs to be called out. There is definitely a deficit of voices and representation of our African Muslim community in everything. That said, I think there's a film screening after this by a young Somali Australian Muslim woman, which I encourage you all to attend.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to ask you this one, Bianca. What do boys need to learn about Muslim girls and women and about supporting gender equality, and how do we teach them?
Oh, my Lord. Alrighty. Okay, what do we teach? Okay, all right. So I teach a men's mentoring program, and we teach young men how to actually understand their own emotions. And I think there's a lot to that. I think that young men need to understand themselves first properly before they can, even understand anyone else in front of them. So by actually educating and empowering young men, by default, I feel like that will give them insight to be able to understand women and women's battles. And I think I'll only leave it at that. I could talk about this for hours.
Do you want to respond to that or make any final comments before we wrap up?
I'll just quickly say that I think exploring men's vulnerability and accepting that and talking about masculinity is something that's only increasingly now becoming front of conversation, and I think the more we do that, the better. Certainly the younger young boys are given exposure to conversations about women and equality and inclusion, the better, and there are certainly programs through schools that are doing that. I think more needs to be done. And it's really important that when we have these conversations, as I do with my 16-year-old son, I'm raising here, is that it's acknowledging the safety and protection and inclusion of women is not because they're women, it's because they're human beings first. I think that's really important, because once we sort of buy into this argument of you need to look out for the weaker sex, that's kind of part of the problem in the first place. So it's about coming from a position of understanding equality, and that we have as much women, mothers, daughters, sisters, whoever they are in your community, when you see an injustice that's against them, call it out, because they're as important as everybody else. Yeah.
Actually, I was thinking a paper I've just been working on, which was based on fieldwork, not my field anyway, with young Muslim men and women, and the difference in talking about their sense of belonging in Australia, and the difference in tone between the young men and the young women was quite marked, because, and other research has shown this too, not within Muslim communities but within the wider communities, because Muslim men are walking in the shadow of terms like terrorist and terms like, potential sexual offender and these kinds of scary terms, whereas women are walking in the shadow of the term oppressed. And so you respond to that in different ways. You respond, and you could see that and reading these responses, but then also thinking of young men I know. You don't, if you're walking in the shadow of the term terrorist, well, you're trying not to look scary. If you're walking in the shadow of the term oppressed, well, it's all about speaking up and looking sassy and being outspoken and being out there and being strong and showing, no, I'm not oppressed, just watch me box. No, sorry, I know that's not what you're doing, Bianca, but, and
I am oppressed because I'm a woman in my sport.
And everybody says, yeah, you go, girl. Whereas these young guys are there trying to look, calm, unscaring, unfrightening. They're not wanting to be too strident about their Muslim identity because they don't want to terrify everybody. So, yeah, I'm Muslim in this kind of low-key, unterrifying way, guys. Which is not to say that they were less committed to their religious faith than their sisters. I thought, actually, it should possibly... it's not like me to say to give the male of the species a bit of a break, but maybe we should. Just occasionally.
So I just want to end really quickly with a very, very quick anecdote. I was dropping my son to school at this train station the other day. He was on his way to school and he was in the car, so he couldn't leave. So I was just using that time to speak to him in a way that he couldn't forget. And as I finished my spiel, I said, now remember, make good choices. If you see anything racist or sexist or transphobic or homophobic or misogynistic, call it out, okay? Just call it out. And he went, oh, yeah, or I'll just give them your number. That's what he said. So
outsourcing it.